Joseph Hall's parents were sure of one thing.
My parents very early convinced me that I would go to school.
And go to school he did, high school and college.
I ended up with a bachelor's degree in business administration with a minor in sociology and education.
1931, fresh out of Wilberforce University, degree in hand, Joe Hall found himself facing a nationwide depression.
I took whatever jobs I could find, including bellhopping, working in a restaurant.
Joe was no stranger to hard work, but he didn't know what hard work was until he landed a job with a family service agency in his hometown of Warren, Ohio.
The welfare problem had become so intense that the commissioners asked the family service to take over that responsibility. They had never had a male in the office, nor had they had a black person. And so it was an experience in two directions.
And he soon found he had a knack for dealing with young people.
One of the groups that I was assigned to was a group of unruly girls, 12 to 16, noted terrors for disturbing programs. Of course, these kids were jazzy kids. We formed a dance group. The disturbance factor sort of disappeared.
Work with the disadvantaged convinced Joe he needed to further his education. He completed his master's in social work at Western Reserve University and came to Cincinnati in 1947.
When Joe came here, he started to work as a stranger and as a newcomer in the community.
The atmosphere in Cincinnati was quite tense.
It was at the time when Cincinnati needed good leadership.
Mr. Hall was the first executive director of the Urban League of Greater Cincinnati.
Joe Hall was the only black person who was the executive director of any social agency. And yet, most of the agency's clients were black. That gives you a picture of what things were like. It also gives you a picture of the kind of man that Joe Hall is.
I regarded Joe Hall as a social engineer whose specialty was bridge building.
He opened many doors of employment for minority youth.
Both the Negro community and the white community.
We hear today a lot about diversity. In my estimation, Joe Hall created diversity in Cincinnati.
And this honor is coming to him late in life. Now, many of his friends that supported him are dead and gone, but his contributions have lived on.
What kind of person would have such an effect on his friends, on our whole community?
Joe was is a very quiet, very observing person.
He is very confident and competent.
Very astute.
Very shrewd.
Very dedicated.
Thoroughly professional.
Has depth when he speaks.
Very direct.
Forceful.
A change agent.
Not a rabble-rouser.
Not the kind of person who ranted or raved.
But he still was aggressive.
Very strong person.
Persuasive.
Proactive.
A man who had vision.
Looks at both sides.
A master in human relations.
And an all-American leader.
He was the trailblazer.
I would describe Joe in one word as gigantic.
Marguerite Hall. She and Joe have been married over 50 years. They met at Wilberforce.
And I saw this little guy just dancing himself away. And I was attracted to it.
They love each other after all of these years.
I think there are many times when Mrs. Hall had some direct influence on the things he did.
They act like sweethearts.
It's a good match.
And the Halls are devoted parents, although Mrs. Hall admits
he was the one who got up and took care of the children.
it's a mark of Joe Hall's dedication to his family that he wanted them recognized with him tonight. The Hall's son, Joseph, is a retired medical corps colonel. Their daughter, Joanna Hall Essens, whose career was in education, sadly has passed away. There have been other tragedies in Joe Hall's life. One in particular affected the entire community.
The late 60s changed the whole complexion.
There were uprisings and riots in the Avondale area.
We became quite aware of not only black anger, but also white anger.
It was a very tense time, and a meeting was held for all the citizens in the area.
Some of the leaders of the riots were very adamant about their rightful role.
Before the meeting commenced, all whites were ordered to leave or face violence.
I remember seeing guns. I remember hearing threats. I remember seeing people shouting.
I was shocked. I was really unprepared because I had preached this business of working together, black people, white people.
I frankly was frightened. There were all kinds of guns. I remember Joe Hall saying, "Oh, the ammunition around here is unreal."
I knew if I lost composure, it would add to the problem.
It was a fearful time, and we, neither of us, had any idea how it was going to come out.
Joe was playing an active part as a peacekeeper.
Now, I couldn't leave. I felt a responsibility, black people, responsibility to white people.
He had a very quieting effect on those who were instigators of the riot.
And I think the very fact that I was able to establish a working relationship with the angriest of blacks sort of kept peace.
Throughout his long and eventful career, Joe Hall has garnered a multitude of civic responsibilities, titles, awards, and honors. They're far too numerous to cover in this brief presentation. Indeed, the entire story of Joe Hall's life could fill a feature-length movie. This honor roll will give you a glimpse of a long and successful career. Joe does enjoy other pursuits. He has an elaborate model train set up, a hobby acquired when he was 7 years old.
He loved music.
He had a love for ballet.
With a little encouragement, I could have been an excellent dance teacher.
Joseph Hall spent years with his eyes on the prize.
Joe Hall served 25 years as executive director of the Urban League.
There was no one person who did more to jar the soul of the corporate community.
His outstanding contribution was that many, many jobs were made available to minorities.
As I look back over those years, the seeds of social change were sowed in Cincinnati.
Joe Hall was on the cutting edge of those issues, which really made life better for me as a young person and now for my children.
How do you determine success, really? There was changes, and some changes were good and some changes were not so good. Some changes came too late and some too soon. We're still not perfect. There's still a need for a Joe Hall.
Ladies and gentlemen, a man who spent a lifetime building bridges of understanding, a great living Cincinnatian, Joseph A. Hall.